So let's start with a few minutes in silence. Just meditate for 5 minutes or so, and then we'll begin with the reading. Today we'll be doing chapter 5 of Natural Liberation. So yeah, let's begin our 5 minute pause now. Okay. Our pause is complete. The core of the Bardo teaching is to begin to see experience and reality as a dream. Experience reality in the same thing. And in seeing the present moment and seeing experience as a dream, a part of one's consciousness or a part of your system begins to turn on that gives you access to um, other states of consciousness. It gives you access to other bardos. You'll begin to remember them. How does that work? By beginning to experience what's in front of you as a dream or as dreamlike. It's as if the tendency to grasp and solidify or take experiences as real is now undermined. And so that being undermined, the uh, the barrier between these states becomes thinner. So let's look at the dream state and the waking state. So the qualities of the waking state versus the qualities of the dream state. And the difference in these qualities, but primarily the difference in our regarding of them is what makes the veil between these two states uh, more so solidified and real. In lucid dreaming, there's a technique called the reality check. So you ask yourself um, as much as you can if you're dreaming right now. And the idea is that by doing this as a habit, asking yourself very often if you're dreaming, then checking for inconsistencies in your present experience, that trains your mind to do so while you're dreaming. Like, to just find yourself in a dream doing a reality check. If you've done this habituation process sufficiently, like you'll ask, "Am I dreaming right now?" And then you'll look. Let's say you're reading a book, and then you focus on the letters. If the letters move around, then you're in a dream. So you do these kinds of checks, and at some point you find yourself doing one in a dream, and then the letters move, or the lines on your hands move, or some impossibility occurs, and then you wake up from the dream. So, excuse me, you awaken while dreaming, you awaken in the dream. So, the dawn of lucidity in the dream, the moment awareness that one is dreaming arises, that one quality is a differentiation between an ordinary dream and a lucid dream. In the dream state versus the real state, or sorry, versus the waking state, there's this general regarding that what happens in a dream is unreal and what happens in waking life is real. Waking life is the primary mode that our consciousness recalls or has memory of. It's our primary orientation, obviously. By beginning to see the waking state as dreamlike or unreal, it's as if you're now resonating with the perception of the dream reality. The way that the dreamscape is regarded as unreal, transitory, all this. By bringing that into the waking state, pretending as if you were dreaming, or regarding what's in front of you as if it were also a dream. It's like the the signature or the frequency of these two states begins to match. And when that matching occurs, the phasing from one to the other becomes more possible. So seeing appearances as dreams is in the Tibetan Bardo teaching called training in the illusory body. So illusory body often body can mean various things. It could be referring to the physical body, but often body, the Sanskrit or Pali term for it is kaya, which can mean body or it can mean dimension. So training in the illusory dimension. Training in the illusory dimension, training the illusory body, it means regarding appearances, regarding this present dimension of experience as illusory. And in doing so, you gain recollection of these other states. So this takes time, and it is a thing that you're doing. So for the rest of the class, this is uh, for the next hour and 40 minutes. We're going to cover a few things. We're going to read from the section, and then there's going to be a period at the end where we've done this exercise before. It's called unstructured time. So it's not that we're meditating necessarily or focusing on an object, but that you're not touching your phone, you're not doing anything in particular, like a specific activity that you're focusing on, but that we're just going to spend 30 minutes in like silence. And for those 30 minutes, I want you to pretend that you're in a dream, literally. So for that unstructured time, you can do what you like, meaning go to the bathroom, make some coffee, but kind of just sit around and don't really do much and see what that's like. It's a break in your habitual patterning. So usually we're always doing something, even if it's meditation. It's like a thing that we're prepared to do, and then we do X, Y, and Z in the meditation time. So in this unstructured time, there's no plan, no agenda. Just experience things as if you were in a dream. And by that, I mean actually pretend, act as if you were dreaming. The same way that, an actor would play a role. You want to be hanging out in the kaya of the illusory body, or you want to be hanging out in the illusory kaya, illusory body. So you're being in this state of dreaminess. The interesting thing about dreaming is that it's happening all the time. It's just something that we don't notice. So This is something that you can also notice in the unstructured time, which is that the dreaming process is always happening. If you notice mental pictures, for example, there's a continuous stream of mental pictures in your mind's eye, always. So it'd be if you just start noticing the stream of mental pictures now, like right now I'm seeing like a green field. Now like a picture of one of those like African shamanic masks. Now a mermaid. So if you notice this particular area of consciousness, the part of the mind that produces images on its own, that is the dreaming faculty. So when you have a dream, that part of the mind that is generating pictures is something that you actually inhabit and you're fully immersed in it. Whereas in the waking state, you just see pictures. And then most of the time, it's not even something that we're paying attention to. We're often just um, focused in uh, our physical perceptions. But this happens, like you're just working or doing whatever during the day, and then you have a random memory arise. Some person comes to your attention, some person that you know comes to your attention, or you think something, you think of something, remember something. So that's always happening. It's just not something that we particularly pay attention to. Um, that that stream of mental production is exactly what is what we're immersed in the dreamscape for the most part. There's some unusual aspects of the dreamscape which we'll get into later also. Some of us have had the experience of like you think of someone and then they call, or um, you remember someone randomly and then you end up encountering them. But the one where you think of someone and then you call them and then you call them and they're like, "Oh my God, I was just thinking about you." Uh, when that happens, there's of course there's always possibility of coincidence, but let's put that aside and let's consider the possibility of shared reality. So you think of one person, that person thinks of you, that person calls you, you pick up. So there's a type of contact between individuated consciousnesses that happens in uh, happens beyond our physical perceptions, and so that's something that also occurs in the dream world. There's parts of the dream world that are like back doors to shared realities, parts of the astral plane. So yeah, we'll discuss more of that later. So for unstructured time, when we do that exercise, you're just like gonna sit here and close your eyes if you want, open them when you want, but kind of just sit here like you don't know what you're doing and like you don't have anything to do. Very powerful. Opens what I call non-volitional consciousness. So most of our activities and endeavors are goal oriented, meaning they're always directed at something. So I have to do X, Y, and Z, it produces this result. Most of the time, you're headed towards something. In unstructured time, that's done away with. So because there's nothing that is being headed towards and nothing that the mind is producing this non-volitional consciousness, this right brain really becomes activated. It's like suddenly, now that you don't have anything to do, you're not trying to do anything. It's a different, it's different from what you're normally used to. So, so we're just combining that non-volitional consciousness, that unstructured time with I'm in a dream. So that's the only difference in previous accounts of when we've done this, you know. Yeah. Okay, so hmm, yeah, so start now with experiencing things as if you were in a dream. This can be a little trippy, but just be in the frame now, like as if your ordinary perceptual lens has been switched out, and now you have a dream perceptual lens. So now start to see, pretend as if things were a dream. And you're gonna do this for the rest of the class. So now I'm pretending as if I'm teaching this class from inside a dream. So that's where we're at, everybody. Okay. We're in dream time now. So in training like this, you develop the capacity to be aware in your dreams, but also to extend the duration of lucidity, and that will become evident. So, so you don't need to tell yourself, "I'm dreaming, I'm dreaming, I'm dreaming, I'm dreaming, I'm dreaming." No, just like act, pretend, use your imagination here, like a kid. I'm in a dream right now, yeah. But it's more of a feel. It's more of a um, like a signature that you inhabit, or a dimension. All right. So this is page 169, chapter 5, the natural liberation of awareness, experiential instructions on the transitional process of meditative stabilization. In the third general topic, the transitional process of meditative stabilization, called the natural liberation of awareness, which is the reading that we did last week, with practical instructions comparable to a lovely young woman gazing into a mirror and seeing clearly what had been unclear, is the subject to be taught. Previously, awareness was pointed out and was shown to be just this, resulting in the mind being tenaciously apprehended as clarity and awareness. By grasping onto it as just that, you cannot be liberated. So here are instructions for enhancing meditative stabilization through identifying awareness by way of practice that is without grasping, and that transcends the intellect. Maintaining awareness through careful examination is liberating. So these are called the instructions on the natural liberation of awareness. This is now Gayatri Rinpoche's commentary. The fundamental obstacle to achieving liberation is grasping. For example, in Hinayana practice, which means Theravada, There is still grasping onto personal identitylessness, which hinders one's attainment of spiritual awakening. The type of grasping addressed in these teachings is a subtle grasping onto awareness itself, and the natural liberation of awareness takes place when such grasping ceases. Prior to this stage of practice, your spiritual mentor should have pointed out to you the salient characteristics of awareness. But then those very qualities can become objects of grasping, since even if you have identified the nature of awareness, you may still be grasping onto it. Now, this phase of the practice is intended to lead you beyond the grasping in a way that transcends the intellect. Among Buddhists, it is not only Hinayana practitioners who succumb to grasping. Even in the practice of Vajrayana, the tendency of grasping may be perpetual in many ways, as for example, in the stage of generation. Once there was a Lama in Tibet by the name of Kushok Abu, who some regard as an incarnation of Khyentse Yeshe Dorje. He was a great Lama with extraordinarily profound realization. This Lama commented that if people practice a stage of generation with grasping, imagining themselves as wrathful deities with their mouths gaping wide, fangs bared, and so on, this just leads to rebirth as a king of demons. Likewise, if people meditate on their Dharma protectors with grasping, that could also lead to rebirth as a demon. The problem here is not in the visualization, but in the grasping, the stage of completion. So, generation and completion stage yogas are uh, two stages of practice in deity yoga in Tibetan Buddhism. So, imagining yourself as Vajrasattva or Tara or wrathful deity like Mahakala, Vajrakilaya. And that's the generation stage. Completion stage is when you dissolve that visualization and you do practices that are related to the subtle body. So like Tumo, uh, these are these are completion stage yogas. I'm skipping past certain parts. The problem here is not in the visualization, but in the grasping. The stage of completion can act as an antidote for the grasping that likely occurs on the stage of generation because it's a dissolution. You're letting go of the deity and mandala and dimension that has been generated in the generation stage when you're assuming the form of the deity. Conversely, the stage of generation is the antidote for the extreme of nihilism, which may arise on the stage of completion. Similarly, there are different techniques with signs and without signs for developing quiescence. That means meditative tranquility. By moving from the methods with signs, that's generation stage, signs has specific qualities and characteristics like the form of the deity. By moving from the methods with signs to those without signs, grasping is diminished. In that process, you must make sure you don't end up in a kind of daze or trance because there's no benefit in that whatsoever. In all these different practices, the essential problem is grasping, the major impediment to our own liberation. Some of you may be wondering, isn't it worthwhile to yearn for liberation and enlightenment? Isn't it worthwhile to have a thought of altruism, wishing to be of service to others, having a thought of compassion? And isn't grasping a part of those mental processes? I don't have an answer to that. You'll have to find out. You, you'll find out. You'll find that out slowly. That's what Gayatro Rinpoche is saying. The phrase quote, maintaining awareness through careful examination means maintaining a constant awareness of awareness itself through careful observation and examination. To quote Dujum Lingpa, never let your awareness leave space. In other words, always keep your awareness in the space in front of you. So these are called the instructions on the natural liberation of awareness. And now this is back to the text. Meditative equipoise on the threefold space. By the way, this is the Bardo of meditation, this particular chapter. Merely having awareness pointed out as before and knowing your own nature is not enough. As an analogy, due to letting one's wild stallion roam freely for many years, its owner will not recognize it. And it is not enough for the owner to recognize the horse once it is pointed out to him by a herdsman. Methods must be used to capture the wild stallion, then subdue it and put it to work. Likewise, it is not enough simply to identify this wild mind. It is said, oh, at this time when the transitional process of meditative stabilization is appearing to me, the confusing multitudes of distractions have been cast off, and without wavering and without grasping, I enter into the domain that is free from extremes. Without wavering and without grasping is self-explanatory. Um, when the transitional process of meditative stabilization is appearing to me, uh, and the confusing multitudes of distractions have been cast off. That means that you're now entering immersion or you're entering samadhi. So, like a state of meditative tranquilization, the mind becoming still and stable is now appearing. You enter into the domain that is free from extremes. Let's see what that specifically means, because that could mean a couple things. Let's see. Hmm. Yeah. Generally, the notion freedom from extremes refers to freedom from the extremes of existence and non-existence. So this is really a philosophical tenet, important, important um, understanding in yeah, in the Tibetan Buddhist teachings, Mahamudra Dzogchen. I'll touch on it briefly. In uh the bar in the introduction to the nature of mind that we read last week, there is a phrase that says the nature of mind is beyond the extremes of existence, beyond the extremes of existing and not existing. We cannot say that it exists because it is not something that we can find or identify. We can't say that it doesn't exist because clearly uh, experience phenomena are immediate. If the nature of mind was non-existent, completely non-existent, there'd be no experience at all. There'd be an absence of experience or phenomena. That's the extreme of cessation. The extreme of existence is to consider the mind as being an actual thing, having an actual essence, or having an actual nature. So when they say the nature of the mind is empty, it just means this. It means that I can't point to one thing called the mind. It's the same as I can't point to one thing called reality, or I can't point to one thing called experience. Like in the last class, I explained these are actually three words for the same thing. There's the nature of mind, and then there's the uh, general conventional use of the word mind, which is actually thought. So the functions of the mind are often regarded to uh, what we consider the definition of mind to be: intending, attending, analyzing, remembering, etc. The functions of the mind um, are often what we identify it as. So those functions and capacities are arising within this present, within this field of experience. And there's no way to separate the mind from what appears. Like I can't I can't find where my mind ends and this hand begins and continue in the exercise and seeing all of this as a dream. Imagine that I'm giving you this discourse from inside of a dream. Okay. So I can't separate mind from this hand as an object, supposed object. So because the mind cannot be actually identified, found, or discerned, we say it's beyond the extremes of existence. In the Atman teachings, generally, uh, Vedanta, Hinduism, the true nature or the nature of mind is called Atman. And the idea is that Atman is this unchanging, immutable essence upon which the mind, the individuated mind, rests like an island. Okay. But the Atman, or the nature of the mind, is regarded as real, ultimate, unchanging, immutable essence. So Buddhism would regard that as an extreme because the assertion is that the mind is something which is immutable and unchanging. But for something to be immutable or unchanging, it has to be discernible. Like to designate an object or designate a thing as unchanging, there have to be particular characteristics that are actually unchanging, and that is not findable according to the Buddhist understanding of this. So, because the nature of mind isn't a thing, because it's not something that we can actually point to and specifically say, "Hey, that is that." That's the nature of mind. Because that doesn't apply to it, we don't apply the extremes of existing versus uh, not existing. It's a subtle point. It's a subtle point. You may think like, oh, that kind of seems useless or unimportant, but there's even some references to it that I found. I think in texts like Ashtavakra, or I have to find the particular Gita, but it says something like Atman is empty of itself, or the Atman is empty of Atman. is basically saying the same thing. So, final example on this to illustrate this particular point of being beyond extremes. I'll read this because it's uh, quite important actually. This is from Peter Brown's Dirty Enlightenment. Remember, this is still happening in a dream. Okay. So these are 10 questions or so from Dirty Enlightenment to point out this, help us get clear on the nature of mind or what the text calls pointing out of awareness. Being and consciousness are one and the same. There is no such thing as objective being without consciousness. All being is subjective. All being occurs to consciousness. Look in your experience and see if this is true. Consciousness is not a thing. It is a capacity to perceive and openness, a clear field of actuality. Look in your experience and see if this is true. Consciousness has no size, location, or duration. Your awareness does not have a back or sides, top or bottom to it. You cannot say how long it lasts. Look in your experience and see if this is true. Consciousness spontaneously appears in itself alone. It is not contained by, made of, or existing in the space of anything but itself. Nothing can be found outside of it. Look in your experience and see if this is true. Have you ever known or experienced anything outside of consciousness? Consciousness is inseparably one with any experience it has. There is zero distance between any experience and the, quote, perceiver. When consciousness experiences, quote, something, it is that, quote, something. Look in your experience and see if this is true. Consciousness always perceives with perfect clarity and unmediated directness, regardless of what is being perceived. Look in your experience and see if this is true. Consciousness is always exactly the same, regardless of what it is or isn't experiencing. Look in your experience and see if this is true. All experience exists within and is made of consciousness. Look in your experience and see if this is true. There is nothing but consciousness. Look in your experience and see if this is true. There is no, quote, I, but consciousness. Consciousness itself is the only home. Look in your experience and see if this is true. I am nothing whatever other than consciousness. Look in your experience and see if this is true. Actually, I'm going to read through all of these because it's actually quite good. All experience spontaneously appears within consciousness and never stabilizes or solidifies. It is always constantly changing, never repeating what it has already appeared to be already. Look in your experience and see if this is true. Although experience appears infinitely diversified, not appearing identical with itself at any two places or times, no object can be separated out from the field of experience, and no two objects can be differentiated from each other, except as the inherent differentiation of the field of consciousness within itself. The entire material universe exists within consciousness. Or better put, the entire quote material universe exists within consciousness. So this isn't a ontological statement. These are experiential investigations. So when you look into your experience to see if this is the case, the material universe as you know it is something that is appearing within experience slash consciousness. Quote thoughts and quote sense objects are indistinguishable as experiences of consciousness. Look in your experience and see if this is true. Quote self and quote other are arbitrary differentiations referring to consciousness itself alone. Look in your experience and see if this is true. Consciousness is omnipresent and omniscient. It is always here, and it is what knows, experiences everything. Look in your experience and see if this is true. It cannot be definitively known what, quote, anything is, except as an experience of consciousness. Objects of experience appear spontaneously within consciousness because of its own inherent nature, as a dream appears spontaneously in the dreaming consciousness because of its inherently creative nature. Consciousness is the absolute mystery. What it actually is cannot be known. It is the absolute existing in itself. Look in your experience and see if this is true. There is no consciousness. Look in your experience and see if this is true. So all of those examples were uh, investigative lookings. And all of them, but the final one, uh, would be can also be considered Atman teachings. But the final one, there is no consciousness, is what we mean by the mind beyond extremes. There is no consciousness means that there's no actual unchanging background that is within or that is undergoing experience. Consciousness and experience are two words for the same thing. So, great deal of non-duality teachings present consciousness as a screen or a mirror upon which experience appears. But like with a mirror, the nature of what is appearing is dependent on an object. The mirror, the mirror arising with that object produces the phenomena of an object in that mirror. Yeah, so statements like the mind is empty of itself, the Atman is empty of itself is just pointing at this. There's no actual thing we can find called consciousness, no actual thing we can find called the absolute. Yeah. Yet somehow all of this appears. That's why it's the great mystery. If there is no consciousness, if the mind is empty of its nature, it's beyond the extreme of existing. If it's beyond the extreme of existing, the truth is that it's not actually there. So in the Zen teachings, they say with mind, with self, there's samsara. With no mind, no self, nirvana. With mind, with self, there's karmic formations, there's intentions to protect, to continue that self or that mind. With no mind, no self, those habitual formations, those karmas cease. So it's referring to pointing, but it's also referring to an actual realization. When the mind, the nature of the mind, when consciousness is realized as being none other than what appears, then the split between the perceiver and the perceived collapses. And that's the meaning of the Buddhist statement. In seeing, there's only the seen. In hearing, there's only the heard. In feeling, there's only what is felt. In cognizing or thinking, there's only what is thought. This being so, Bahia, you are neither here of this world nor of the next world, nor in between the two. This alone is the end of suffering. So when the supposed background that is experiencing samsara collapses, samsara itself collapses because it's the notion of a background, the notion of a self or a mind or a being or an essence that is undergoing or accumulating experience. It's that view, that conviction that is the ignorance that turns the entire wheel of becoming. And when that view, that conviction, that ignorance collapses, then the intentions and karmas, the motivations that perpetuate the self at the core of the wheel cease. So there's different ways to come to that, but this is how it's presented generally. Wow, it's only been an hour? Strange. Well, if everyone wants, you can take a 5-minute break and then we can come back and continue with the reading for another like 20 or 30 minutes, and then we'll do our unstructured unstructured time. So can I'll take a break now. I'm gonna make some coffee. Fabian, how long was that break? Seriously? Jesus Christ, man. Sorry about that. All right. Really, it wasn't. Damn it. Okay. Okay, perfect. Just sitting here dreaming. That's good. That's exactly what. Okay, so you guys just got so you got you got front loaded with unstructured time. So so what we'll do is we'll read till 10:45, and then we'll do a final 15 minutes of unstructured. So beginners must practice and meditate with unwavering mindfulness. When the wild stallion is not subdued, it must be trained with unwavering enthusiasm. If you waver, you will lose control of the horse, fall down, and hurt yourself. Likewise, if beginners pursue ordinary thoughts, they will descend to miserable states of existence and will be hurt. So sustain your meditation with unwavering mindfulness. Um, so, like many of the instructions in this text, um, the instructions are for retreat periods. Yeah. And this is Gayatri Rinpoche now. By having the nature of awareness pointed out to you by your spiritual mentor, you get some understanding, but that alone is not sufficient. Understanding is said to be like a patch. You sew it on, but it very easily falls right off. So initial understanding must be sustained. This natural liberation of awareness is the very understanding of your own awareness. Insofar as we understand our own present awareness, we do not look with hope to other beings. It is our own awareness that is liberating. We do not look with hope to other beings for our liberation. And this is actually a good passage, and then I'll skip this part of the commentary. Especially here in the West, when people think of meditation, they think of something that's very special. When you practice meditation, you expect to see, hold, feel, smell, or taste something special. You hope to get something or to be able to bring about something special in your meditation. All such notions are misguided. In the actual practice of meditation, you set aside all your samsaric trips and letting them be, you do nothing special. Since the very nature of awareness itself is beyond birth, abiding, and cessation, how could meditation actually be doing anything? There is nothing to meditate on, and there is no basis of meditation either. The essence of this is the fruition. Spiritual fruition itself is transformed into the path. Is there a fruition or culmination of spiritual practice? To transform the fruit into the path, you practice without hope of accomplishing anything and without fear of not accomplishing anything. You can ask, well, won't I become a Buddha? If I practice, won't this lead to my achievement of Buddhahood? You transform the fruition, which is Buddhahood, into the path. A lot of people clap their hands in debate on this point, and the end result is that their hands get very, very red. Again, someone can ask, don't you become a Buddha as a result of practicing this path? Isn't there, in fact, a result that comes from following the practice? My response to this is, can't you be satisfied with transforming the fruit into the path? Quote, meditation is another name for not meditating on anything. And in terms of the meaning, the meditative equipoise in the meditative stabilization of the threefold space is taught in the Tantra of the three phases of liberation by observation. O Lord of mysteries, these are the instructions for actualizing the Dharmakaya. External space is this empty intervening space. Internal space is the empty hollow channel that connects the eyes and the heart. The secret space is the precious palace of your own heart. Direct your awareness to your eyes. Direct your eyes to the intervening space. And by leaving your gaze there, primordial wisdom freely arises. When consciousness is directed to your eyes, non-conceptual awareness alone will appear without being obscured by any compulsive ideation. So this is saying sitting in meditation with your eyes open, letting your gaze rest on space, or in the space in front of you. You're not doing anything in particular. You're not attempting to meditate. You're not attempting to generate change or alter experience. And by sitting just like this in non-conceptual, non-volitional consciousness, wisdom arises. So insight arises spontaneously. That's what the passage is saying. By leaving your gaze there, primordial wisdom freely arises. First, practice in short sessions, and as you become accustomed to it, practice in longer and longer sessions. When you bring the session to an end, do not get up abruptly, but rise slowly without losing the sense of meditating, and proceed without losing the sense of awareness, without wavering and without grasping. As you eat, drink, speak, and engage in every activity, do so without losing the stream, do so without losing the century of unwavering mindfulness. If this happens in meditative equipoise, but not afterwards, by integrating this with your spiritual practice and all activities of moving, walking, lying down, and sitting, whatever you do will appear as meditation. So the instruction here is to integrate this non-volitional consciousness, this not meditating on anything, into activities by alternating them with short sessions, short sitting sessions. So an example of this would be to sit for 20 minutes with your eyes open and then walk around, do something, but do it in such a way that you're allowing for a walking or moving non-volitional state, non-volitional consciousness, natural state. So then everything appears or is realized as meditation. Everything is realized as meditating. It becomes evident that one's mind or consciousness or reality, it's not something that you're intentionally producing. It's something that's happening all by itself. There's a treatise that states when meditating, do not meditate on anything at all. This is page 178, so I'm skipping through some of the Gayatri Rinpoche's commentary. When meditating, do not meditate on anything at all, for in the absolute nature of reality, there is nothing on which to meditate. The all-accomplishing sovereign states, oh, this is the revelation of myself, the empty, all-accomplishing one. The human body is unborn, and ideation is samadhi. Meditation and non-meditation do not depend on conditions. The object of meditation is all phenomena just as they appear, without any manner of placing awareness anywhere, letting it be in its own state, without modification, is meditation. O heroic Vajra, become acquainted with reality. If the contemplated reality, the mysterious awareness, does not appear, those who grasp onto and become habituated with words and sounds will not enter the oral transmission of myself, the all-accomplished one. And do not apply your mind to anything and do not meditate. Do not modify your body, speech, or mind, but let them loose, without regard for the planets, constellations, lunar date, or time. Do not engage your mind and be free of mantras and mudras. Do not apply your mind to anything and do not meditate. Means don't try to do anything. Do not modify your body, speech, or mind, but let them loose. Means don't attempt to control or change body, speech, or mind. Without regard for the planets, constellations, lunar date, or time refers to, forget about doing things on special days, astrological special days. Do not engage your mind. Which means don't use thought. Don't utilize intention. Be free of mantras and mudras. To use mantra to do mudra, there's a volition involved. So this is providing statements on fruition. Like doing mantras, doing mudras, doing things on specific days in the right time. That's all goal oriented. That's all path. Modification of body, modification of speech, modification of mind. That's all eightfold path, of course, right? Classic Buddhism, right speech, right mindfulness, right thought, right intention, all of this. So in this passage, it's saying, let all of that go and don't do anything. Because those all become objects and fixations of doing. And right here in this, the present moment is completely immediate and unconcealed. It's a good question, Fabian. I'll take that after. But for the next 14 minutes, just sit here. Yeah, don't try to meditate. Don't try to not meditate. Just like be. Okay, let's begin. Hmm. All right. So if you'd like to do this as an experiment, you can continue this illusory body exercise for the rest of the day. It's very good for lucid dreaming. But are there any questions? There was one question in the chat from Fabian. Is this connected to attachment to rites and rituals being one of the fetters? No, that passage was about um, in the Indian traditions, there's an emphasis on doing special rituals or meditations on specific days uh, and given hours to reap like special benefits. So let's say a particular goddess is it's a goddess of it's a day of a specific goddess. So everyone's going to meditate like in the hour and day of that goddess to receive a prosperity blessing or something like that. So that passage was about just like doing away with all these external things like specified times for meditation, specified benefits, mantras, mudras, like resting in a total uh, unfabricated state. Yeah. Rites and rituals as a attachment to rites and rituals as one of the fetters that falls away is specifically referring to the reliance on rites and rituals as a means to liberation or as a means to awakening, enlightenment. That's what that refers to. So when you um in the first stage of awakening, when that awakening occurs, it's abundantly clear that no rites or rituals could have produced this. Meaning, like a good way of putting that is no no teacher or no ritual can give you the nature of your own mind. You know, your mind is already present. It's already immediate. It's already awake. Reality, experience, already present, already immediate, already awake. So teachers can provide the pointers, but it's not like reality gets transferred to you, you know. What is transmitted or what can be transmitted uh, is is a recognition. But even then, it's not like my recognition becomes your recognition. It's just that for whatever reason, it's quite mysterious. Um, you see or recognize the thing that's being pointed out in the transmission. So or in the pointing out instructions, right? Yeah. So no, so meditating in a special hour of a given day does not um, is not related to recognizing your own nature. Yeah. And the reason this is a specific rule is because in the Buddhist time, um, it was a thing that people uh, assumed or was a part of the culture that if you do this right, if you do this ritual, it'll lead to liberation or it'll lead to enlightenment. And so part of his model was that that's absurd. Yeah, that you could, that mm, putting flowers around a stone and then pouring milk on it is somehow going to lead to the destruction of craving. Yeah, or that walking a far distance from one place to another on a pilgrimage is going to result in the falling away of grasping. So people have the notion that engaging in particular activities will result in those kinds of fruitions. And yeah, the Buddhist case was that they don't. It's unrelated.